Hello, my name is Andrew Keane. Welcome to Keane on America, the daily show about everything that matters, with the world's leading commentators and thinkers. Hello, everybody. I have some good news for those of you like myself who can be somewhat frustrated with the conservative, small c, and bureaucratized nature of the publishing business. The good news is it wasn't always that way. My guest today, Gayle Feldman, has written a book about the American publishing industry, and particularly one figure in it, one of the dominant figures, Bennett Cerf, the co-founder of Random House. It's called Nothing Random. And it's a wonderful introduction to the exciting, innovative, intellectually adventurous nature of the American publishing business. Gayle is joining us from New York City, the heart of the New York publishing business. Gayle, is that fair that today the publishing business, you know it, you've been working at Publisher Weekly now for many years, you know it inside out. Is it fair that that today's American publishing industry is a pale shadow of what it once was intellectually and culturally?
It's a very different business in many ways. In Bennett Cerf's day, it was a very individualistic business where you had individuals who owned companies or partnerships owned companies, and the owners were very, very involved in the day-to-day. Today, there are 5 big corporate publishing houses. There are lots of others, but there are 5 big corporate publishing houses, and they're very corporate.
Yeah, it's the corporate. I left out the corporate bit. Random House, of course, is part of Penguin Random House. In those days, would it be fair to say, Gayle, that these days smart young kids, adventurous kids go into business, Silicon Valley, technology business? 50, 100 years ago, they went into Hollywood and then the publishing business. Is that an equivalent to think of it? That the publishing was once like Silicon Valley in terms of its innovation, excitement, and indeed opportunity to make money?
I would say that publishing was revolutionized in the late 19-teens and the 1920s by a group of young Jewish men whose parents or grandparents had been immigrants and made money, often in the garment trade. And these young men were educated. They went to good colleges, and they wanted to do something that was intellectually interesting, that was business, that was not the rag trade. And they loved books, and they went into books. They started their own companies because they couldn't get anywhere given the anti-Semitism that was endemic in America in the 1920s. They couldn't get anywhere within the established houses, so they started new ones, and they changed the business.
Is the best equivalent Hollywood? I mean, it sounds like there's a similar narrative there.
Except the men who went into book publishing, whether it was Bennett Cerf and his business partner, Donald Klopfer, or Alfred Knopf and his wife, Blanche Knopf, or Harold Ginsberg, who started Viking Press, or Simon and Schuster, or a man named Horace Liveright. They were much more intellectual, or if not intellectual, lovers of books, because you don't have to be intellectual to be a lover of books and a reader of books.
And in fact, sometimes it's better not to be an intellectual. You brought up the J word, Gayle, Jewish. Your protagonist in your book, Nothing Random, Bennett Cerf, was Jewish.
Yes.
What was different then? Why were they? The Jews, of course, weren't the only immigrants into America, and none of them were welcomed in a particularly pleasant manner by white America, whether it was Irish or Italian or even German Americans. Why was it the Jews who pioneered publishing as opposed to, say, the Irish or the Italians?
Well, I think that books have always been valued by Jews. Jews are the people of the book. And the combination of honoring, valuing books and a mercantile sense. I mean, Bennett Cerf's grandfather, his mother's father, came to America during the Civil War in the 1860s. By the time he died in 1908, he'd made a fortune, first in the tobacco trade and then through land speculation. Richard Simon of Simon and Schuster, his forebears, made money in the garment trade. So did Harold Ginsberg of Viking, garment trade. So you had the combination of a mercantile feel and education. I mean, these men went to, many of them went to Columbia. There were some in the book business who went to Yale or Williams. Very good schools.
Very good schools. Cerf himself, the subject of your book, went to a prep school and then to Columbia.
Sorry, he didn't go to a prep school. Today in New York, there are two academically oriented high schools that you have to test into that are very well known. One is Bronx Science, where our new mayor went, and one is Stuyvesant. In Bennett's day, there was one school, which was called Townsend Harris, that academically gifted students could test into. And it was hard, very hard to get in. And he got in.
It was in Hamilton Heights, right?
It was actually, it's where City College of New York is now. And City College, one of the buildings that City College occupies, was that high school.
Gayle, one of the things I've sometimes noticed, I know a lot of people in publishing, as a writer, written several books as well as an interviewer of many other writers, is some people who go into publishing are either failed writers or people who aspire to become writers and want to use their experience in publishing to write books. It also attracts a lot of academics, sometimes failed academics, sometimes aspiring academics. Did Bennett Cerf ever flirt with the idea of being a writer himself, or indeed an academic, given his intellectual prowess?
I think that he flirted with becoming a writer because as a kid, there was a magazine in those days that a lot of people who became writers, Faulkner, and I think Edna and Vincent Millay, and Bennett, all sent pieces to this kids magazine called the St. Nicholas magazine. And so he had something published in that. And he, at Columbia, was very involved in the both the college newspaper and the college humor magazine. He was the editor of the college humor magazine. So yeah, he went to Columbia's journalism school.
And then, of course, would it be fair again to say you're a biographer, also a historian, a cultural historian, implicitly in this book?
Yeah.
So writers and writing was a much more glamorous business in the 1920s, 30s, 40s than it is today, 100 years later. That the great writers of that age, I know that some people have compared Bennett's Cerf, his sales skills, with that of Gatsby. But there are no equivalent of a Fitzgerald today in terms of the glamour and perhaps the sadness of superstar writers.
Yeah, I would say it is quite different today. You know, these were all national figures. You know, Fitzgerald, Hemingway, but Fitzgerald was a national figure, then not a national figure, and then he was revived. Faulkner, you know, most of Faulkner's books were out of print until he won the Nobel Prize.
And
But
Bennett and Random House published
you,
Faulkner, didn't they?
Yes. But there was a kind of glamour, and I mean, Bennett was very much a part of the cultural scene in America. During the Second World War, he did radio broadcasts in New York. There was a show called Books Are Bullets. It was a patriotic show. But he also wrote a #1 best-selling book. It was a humor anthology. He didn't publish it because there were paper restrictions because of the war. His friends and rivals, Max and Dick at Simon and Schuster, they published the book instead. So he was known from that time on. He became a national figure, and he became even more of a national figure when he went on TV in the early 1950s.
So a man of many talents, socialite, glamorous, weddings, businessman, writer. What was his business skill? How did he, I know he acquired Random House. What was his particular business talent to build a remarkably successful publishing empire?
Well, he actually bought, not Random House, he bought something called the Modern Library, which was started by a man named Horace Liveright, who was an extraordinary publisher who didn't publish for very long. But he knew how his instincts were marvelous, and he was very smart. I mean, he never pretended to be an intellectual, but he graduated Phi Beta Kappa. He had a sense of marketing, of how you reach people. He was not a snob, and he knew that in order to stay in business, you had to sell books. So he figured out some innovative ways to reach people. He had a great sense of humor, and his ads were very funny. And all of those things appealed. And he had a very good instinct about what different kinds of writers wanted or needed and how to give it to them.
There was then, as is now, a great deal of snobbery, intellectual snobbery, as you know better than I do, again, Gayle, in New York, especially, I think, amongst progressives. One of the intriguing things about Bennett Cerf is that he published Ayn Rand, who, of course, is the nemesis of the left, the most loathed woman, I guess, 20th century right-wing philosopher, inspired Reagan, maybe even Trump, but a brilliant writer and self-publicist herself. Does the Cerf Rand axis, does that speak of his ability to pick out people who aren't necessarily popular with other intellectuals?
Well, he was a liberal. He was always a liberal, a Democrat, and he never hid that. He was quite active and outspoken. But Rand had already published The Fountainhead with a different publishing house, and she was looking for a new publisher.
And she was an incredible pain in the neck, wasn't she? I mean, all right, most writers are pains in the neck, but she
was an
wins the award for the biggest pain in the neck of the century in terms of what she wanted and how to deal with her and all the rest of it.
She was a very tough lady. She was a survivor, you know.
Another Jew, although less overt on her Jewishness than I'm guessing Bennett Cerf.
He wasn't very overt. Most people did not think he was a Jew. Most people did not know he was a Jew. I mean, Cerf is a French Jewish name, but most people don't know that.
Alsatian, yes.
Yeah. So she was a survivor, an extraordinary survivor, you know, of the Bolshevik Revolution. You know, her family's status changed completely, and she got to America and she got to Hollywood and reinvented herself, and she had this success with The Fountainhead. So people knew her next book most likely would be a success, and a number of houses wanted to publish her, not just Random House. She kind of went and interviewed several different publishers. And Bennett had lunch with her and was very open about his own political ideas, as was his business partner, who was another liberal. And yet he said, you know, I won't censor your book. If you come to us, we will publish the book, and we will publish it better than other houses will publish it. We will market it better. And she was really impressed by his confidence and by what he said. And he was impressed by her mind. I mean, she was brilliant. His partner famously said, you know, Ayn Rand was wacky as a fruitcake. And Bennett was very open about the fact that he completely disagreed with her ideas. But she liked the fact that they were so open about the disagreement and so confident in themselves as publishers.
I mean, her book sold over 37 million copies, didn't sell. As you say, the first book was not with Random House, but it must have made them a lot of money. I mean, would it be fair to say, Gayle, and I wonder whether Bennett Cerf sort of pioneered this model, that being a publisher is rather like being a venture capitalist, is you make 10 bets and you assume that one of them will turn out, maybe one will turn out okay, and most of them are loss leaders. Was that the kind of model that Cerf pioneered, so that his success with Rand's books would have financed hundreds, maybe thousands of other authors? What did he think of the advance model for publishers in terms of writers, of getting an advance before sales? Was this something he liked? Was it something he championed?
I don't think it was a question of liking or championing it. People did get advances. They weren't that big, and he could be very careful with money, but he could also be supportive. I mean, there were authors, young authors, whom he knew. He had to give advances out, you know, not all at once, but monthly amounts, so that they wouldn't squander the money, but so that they would be supported. He understood what any really good publisher understands. You have to have a diverse portfolio, as it were. You have to publish some books because they will make you money. And you have to publish other books because they're written by young writers whom you think have talent and who might become very important writers. I think that while he was still alive, Random House began to publish Cormac McCarthy. Cormac McCarthy's first book just came in over the transom into the slush pile, and a young woman said, "Look at this," and it made its way up the ladder, and it was published. And then I don't think that Cormac McCarthy's books made any money for Random House until his fifth book.
So you have to invest in talent. It's rather like being a venture capitalist. And of course,
yes,
it wasn't just Rand he invested in, for better or worse. There was Truman Capote, there was Dr. Seuss, there was James Michener, there was even James Joyce. What were the authors that he was most proud of championing? Would it have been a highbrow like Joyce, or an intellectual like Truman Capote, or a commercial success like James Michener?
Well, I think he was very, very proud of all of them. Joyce, Bennett, and his business partner, Donald Klopfer, fought the court case that finally allowed James Joyce's Ulysses to be published legally in the United States. And they published the book in 1934. And it was the single thing I think they were most proud of doing, because it was a landmark case.
And is that was because
it changed the culture.
Right. Was it not allowed because of obscenity, swear words, sexual descriptions?
All of the above. All of the above. It was not allowed. There had been attempts. It was partially serialized in a magazine, and the publishers of the magazine, who were two women, were prevented. I mean, they were stopped. The book was burnt, or rather the magazines, and banned, and they were told if they continued, they would be prosecuted and go to jail. So the court case that allowed it to be legal was extremely important, because it made it possible for other books to be legal, and later for films. It was used as a precedent that allowed foreign films to be seen in America in the 1950s and 60s. So that was important. Bennett was very close to Truman Capote. He began publishing Capote when Capote was very young, and he cared a great deal about Capote, and Capote loved Bennett. And Bennett adored the theater. He published lots of plays, and the first great author who signed on at Random House was Eugene O'Neill. So he was really in awe of O'Neill. And another author whom he was very close to, who was one of his closest friends, was Moss Hart, who was the director and playwright. He directed Julie Andrews in My Fair Lady on Broadway, but he also wrote a very famous memoir of theatrical beginnings called Act One. So Bennett loved him.
The reviews so far of the book, Gayle, as you know, have been very positive. One review has described his life and the book as well as cinematic. Was there a cinematic quality, not just to Bennett Cerf's life, but to your biography? Does someone need to turn it into a movie? Who would make the best movie of Bennett Cerf's life?
Who knows? Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, I have no idea, but he had an amazing life. It took me a very long time to write this book, because his life, as one of his sons said to me, it covered a vast surface. He knew everybody from, James Joyce down to Henry Kissinger. He knew lots of people in Hollywood, in politics, in TV, as well as in books. And he had enormous energy and was very witty and could be...
Did you know him personally?
No. I only knew him when I was a kid. I used to watch him on TV. Sunday nights for 16 years, he was a panelist on a game show called What's My Line? And many, many, many millions of Americans watched that show religiously.
It's not your first book. You've written a couple of others, but you spent a long time, Gayle, researching, writing this book. Was it a labor of love? Why did you write the book? Why did you spend so much time on it?
I've spent my whole life in books. And I was a bookworm as a kid. And books are really, really important to me. And this man has sort of fallen off the face of the earth. And he changed the culture. The books that he published, the authors that he published, and how he published them really changed our culture. And I thought he should be recalled to life, and his world should be recalled to life. Publishing is very different now, and I think, especially post-pandemic, young people in the business and readers ought to know about the world as it was then, because it still echoes in our world today.
Is there particular messages, pieces of wisdom that you think a Bennett Cerf could teach the corporate executives at companies now like Penguin Random House, one of the big 4 or 5, Simon & Schuster? What would you like people, alongside this remarkable life of a man who shaped culturally the century, what can we learn today to revitalize perhaps the publishing business and revitalize the act of reading?
Well, I think that you have to be willing to take risks, that you have to give writers time. These days, the algorithms and the computer history of sales count for a very great deal. And I think that the kind of humanity that was seen then, that is something. Also, again, post-pandemic, I think that the book business needs to have apprenticeship. And I don't think that working totally from home in a business like the book business is a good thing. I think you need to have people learn from other people in one place.
What about the act of being taught to write, especially in fiction? I mean, no one taught Ayn Rand to write, certainly in English. He's self-taught, or James Michener, or Dr. Seuss, or Truman Capote. They didn't go to creative writing school. What was Bennett Cerf's take on the professionalization of writing?
I don't think, creative writing programs, there weren't many in his day. So I don't think that he thought about that much. It's,
he wanted people to get out in the world and live and be Faulkner or be Dr. Seuss. They couldn't just sit at home and do it, or they certainly couldn't be taught to become great writers.
I think that he, as I said, he didn't encounter that really. And writers came in all sorts of ways. he was also asked about writers whom he was close to. Ayn Rand wasn't the only very strong woman whom he was close to until he wasn't. Because Rand broke with him politically later.
She broke with everybody, so that he wasn't
yes,
alone in that.
but he was very close to Gertrude Stein. He loved Gertrude Stein, and Gertrude Stein loved him. This strange but true. So, he published the Gertrude Steins, but he also published a woman who wrote a book called The Snake Pit in the 1940s, which her name's Mary Jane Ward, and it was a trailblazing book. It was a novelized, thinly novelized memoir, really, of her crack up. She'd had a very bad nervous breakdown and wrote about what it was like to have a nervous breakdown and be institutionalized. It was a huge bestseller, and it spawned a film, and it's forgotten about today, but it was an important book in its day. And, she was a housewife in the Midwest, and this manuscript came in, and he published it.
There's somewhat of a ladies' man about Morgan Cerf. As he said, he had his very highly visible marriage, association with a number of glamorous women, went to nightclubs, did what all successful men did in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. Can one be Bennett Cerf these days, Gayle? Can you get away with it? Is he the kind of guy that today might be outed for inappropriate behavior or comments? As I know the book, where you're clearly a great admirer of him, but it's not a hagiography. You recognize that he himself had his own foibles.
Oh, yeah. This is not a hagiography at all. It is as fact-based as it could be. I think that he was a man of his time, and readers will see that he was a man of his time. But he was unique. There has never been a publisher like him before or since, because he was a public man. As I said, most Americans, when I was a kid, knew who this person was. They knew no other publisher. How many Americans now could name you one publisher?
He was the equivalent, in a sense. The journalistic equivalent might have been Cook, Alistair Cook, the English journalist, incredibly visible on American television, or Alfred Hitchcock as well, the film director who had his own TV show. Was he the literary equivalent to Cook or Hitchcock?
You could say Cook, but he just was all over the place because people in Hollywood knew him. There was a very famous agent in those days called Swifty Lazar, and Swifty Lazar said that Bennett was the only publisher who really knew how to sell books to Hollywood. And he was a first nighter. He would always go to the first nights of new shows on Broadway. There is no one in the book world. You could say for a while there was, Oprah Winfrey, when she had her book club in the glory days. She was known in the way Cerf was known.
Well, finally, is there anyone in the book business, Gayle, equivalent? My publisher, Morgan Entrekin, is a man around town. Perhaps the best known independent publisher. He's certainly not as powerful or as famous as Bennett Cerf. But are there eclectic businessmen in publishing these days on the Morgan Entrecan model that you think can help save the publishing business, or at least revitalize?
I don't think it's a question of saving the publishing business. But I think there are a lot of smaller houses, and Morgan runs one of them, and he's a very fine publisher. But I do think that one needs the smaller houses because they bring in a kind of originality and a human quality that, you know, there are lots of people working in corporate publishing, but I would say the last one who had a very big stamp, not like Bennett, but very big stamp, was Sunny Mehta at Knopf.
I was thinking of Nan Talese, but
Nan Talese worked for Bennett. She got her start, and
right.
She loved him. But Sunny Mehta, you know, very transatlantic, and he ran several of the divisions.
Well, let's end on a positive note, because I think Bennett would expect us to end positively rather than too pessimistically. Remarkable Life, which Gayle Friedman writes about, Nothing Random, Bennett Cerf and the publishing house he built, which was, of course, Random House. There does seem to be something, and maybe Bennett would have had some thoughts on this, Gayle, something remarkably resilient about the book. I mean, the CD has died, the physical newspaper is dying. But as you know, the book business maybe isn't the most dynamic of businesses, but people still love their books. They still buy books. There are still bookstores at airports, bookstores in the high street, bookstores in malls. What was Bennett's take on the book as an artifact? And would he be surprised with its relative survival, successful survival, compared to other communications mediums?
No, I think that he was a great believer in the power of the book. He saw, before most other people did, that there would be this kind of corporatization. But the book, you know, there have been many times in the history of the book business when people moaned that the book was going to die. I think that the book is not going to die, because I think people really like books, and people need to read, and reading a book is a pleasurable experience, and books are beautiful objects, and I don't think the book is going to go anywhere.
Well, one beautiful object is Gayle Feldman's new book, Nothing Random, Bennett Cerf and the publishing house he built, a book written with love and affection, many years. Congratulations, Gayle, on the book. Congratulations on the very fine reviews it's already getting.
Thank you.
And you've made me want to write another book. Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you so much.